Hi, my name's Karen. I'm a health worker here in Manchester, and I'm here to offer full solidarity to students. I just think that the reason that we've got a pandemic is nothing to do with students, and it's everything to do with Boris Johnson and his awful government. They're the people who are responsible for the mess that this country's in. We have one of the worst records in the world. I think probably only America has worse, and Brazil. And I think you have to look at the right-wing leaders across the world to see the people who have consistently put profit before people and don't seem to care. And in some ways, they say they're looking after the economy, but not only have we had one of the highest death rates in the country, in the world, we also have one of the biggest cuts in the impact on the economy. And that's because every time they don't solve the problem of the pandemic, they make it harder for us to go about our ordinary business. And I just think from the beginning, lockdown was only ever a temporary measure in order to get the number of infections down so that they could bring in a proper test, trace and track system. But they chose to put that test, trace and track system in the hands of their mates, the private profiteers, and those private profiteers have taken billions and billions and billions of pounds of our money, and they have used it not to test, track and trace, but to line their pockets in profits, because that's what they do. They are profiteers. They haven't put it in the hands of experts. We have experts in public health, we have experts in councils, we have experts in the health service, and they haven't chosen to do any of that because they believe that privatisation is best. And what this pandemic shows is that privatisation is worst, and it's not just a sort of an academic question when we say privatisation is worse, but now thousands and thousands of people who should be alive are now dead. Their families are mourning and distressed, and they will never get them back. We have even more people who have long COVID who will never probably have the same health again, and these are preventable. They are preventable. They were planned, they were expected. You have to be stupid to not think that this was going to happen, and to somehow imagine that you could bring 40,000 students into Manchester with not an ounce of planning and somehow think that that wasn't going to create a spread was absolute nonsense. If you look at the curve for how many infections, the line was flat for August, and it started to go up when schools went back, and it started to go up quite significantly. By the end of September, when universities came back and you added universities on top of schools, it started to go up massively. And once COVID's high in the population, if you're doubling 2 infections every day, you only get 4, 8, 16. If you're doubling hundreds of infections or 1,000 infections every few days, then you're going to end up with an awful lot of infections very, very quickly. And there is a job to be done which our government is still not prepared to do. I know people who've been told to take time off work, but have been told that we won't pay you while you're waiting for your test result, we won't pay you while you're waiting for your test, we won't pay you while you're shielding, and we're left with a choice of destitution or safety. That's not a real choice. That's a choice, that's Boris Johnson's choice, where we have to make the choice between do you want to live or do you want to eat? And not surprisingly, lots of workers choose to feed their children rather than keeping safe. And I think that's the tragedy of what's happening at the moment, and that's why I'm so pleased, as people before profit, to say I don't blame students, I blame Boris. I don't blame young people, I blame Boris. I don't blame black people, I blame Boris. I don't blame any working class person who doesn't comply with the laws, because to be honest, if they made sense, people might have a little bit more willingness to be cooperation, but the current rules make no sense to anybody. They're not scientific, and all that does is it leaves people open to more conspiracy theories and nonsense and makes it harder. We need to get rid of this government. We need to get rid of a system that consistently puts profit over people, and that's why I think protests like today, where people have come out and said enough's enough, is absolutely right. And I think you're right. You should be withholding your money for rent. The idea that they are charging rent, they should allow people who want to opt out with no losses if you want to go home, and they should be giving you your 9,000 tuition fees back again. It's a disgrace that you end up paying a price for something. If they want to turn education into a commodity, which is what they've done, when they're not delivering that commodity, they have to give you your money back. So absolutely 100% to you today. Well done, and let you know that the people of Manchester are standing with you.
Incredible. It's so nice to have solidarity from the wider community. Next we're going to bring in Amin from Greater Manchester Unison's Black members.
Thank you. I'm really proud to be here standing with you today for people before profit, for students before profit. It's a disgrace the way they've treated students, as speakers have said already. They've just basically fleeced you for the money and don't really care about your health and safety. And that's obvious to everyone, not just to yourselves. Those of us that work in local government, providing public service in hospitals, we know the same thing. They could have put the lockdown in the start of COVID at the start. They chose profits over that, and twice as many people have died already from COVID than needed to because they were slow to lock down. They're in such a hurry to relieve the restrictions. They did so before they got the death rate down, before they had test and trace. And now again we're suffering the consequences of a government that doesn't care about ordinary people's lives. I think we're some sort of collateral damage in their way to make profits out of our expense. So we have to stand together, all of us together. We've got a meeting on Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock online, where we've got trade unions speaking, we've got activists speaking from across Greater Manchester, we've got John McDonald involved as well. And we encourage you all to take part and to share that meeting and make sure it's as big as possible. Because we want to make sure that we build a bigger campaign as possible to bring all those different campaigns together. Yours, the people in the NHS that are fighting for a decent pay rise, and to be protected from second time round of COVID. For all black people that are worried about disproportionate impact again, because the government have done nothing to protect them from being the victims again, because they've done nothing to address racism. In fact, they pretend that racism doesn't exist, this government, and that's why there's such a powerful thing that we've got a Black Lives Matter movement that's willing to go out on the streets and fight for our equality, all of us together. We need all of us together because there are more of us than there are of them. We need to use our collective power, difficult though it is on the COVID, to organise ourselves through social media as well as through protests. These protests are so important. They may not be huge, but it means it gives a voice to those people that are stuck in home or worried about coming out to say that people stand with them. We all have to stand together with those students that are imprisoned at the moment in their halls of residence. We need to show that we're willing to fight for a better, against what the government are doing, against what universities are doing in terms of fleecing you for the money. We have to show that we won't accept it and fight back, because we won and delayed the schools going back in June, but we didn't keep the pressure on. We won when we got them to accept your A-level results. We can win again now if we stand together and fight to make sure you get the money back you deserve from this, for being fleeced. So let's stand together, let's fight together, let's hopefully all win together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now we're going to have a personal story from a student here, Asha.
So basically, I have ADHD and chronic depression. I rely on face-to-face teaching, which we were told we were going to have, only for that to change 2 days into teaching. And I've just come from a meeting with my tutor where I've been told that maybe I just can't do university this year. He said, if you break your leg, then you can't run the race, and maybe I'll just have to drop out. I would still have to pay for all the accommodation that they've made us come into and this teaching that I've had so far, but not.
Absolutely horrific. It's disgusting what the university is doing. So we're going to have a final speaker, Matty, come, and then I'm going to talk a bit more about the rent strike, and then we're going to march up.
Hi everyone, I'm Matty from Students Before Profit. So we've organised this protest, and this is the third time that we've been on a Manchester campus. This is the third time that we've had to demand that the uni finally listens to us. Because our institutions and our governments have let us down. Time and time again in this pandemic, we've seen the government ignoring advice, ignoring trade unions, and then blaming those affected for their impacts. We saw it with care workers and their PPE. We saw it with the NHS and their PPE. We saw it with student nurses who opted in. And here they go again, blaming students. This is not the university experience we signed up for. We were sold a lie. We were promised safe campuses. We were promised mental health support. We were promised academic support. And instead we've come back to departments that have been absolutely ravaged by cuts over the summer. We've been forced back onto campuses that have become coronavirus hotspots, despite repeated warnings from April that this would happen. And when we raised this, when we raised Fallowfield, we got ignored. Students' doors were being spat on 2 weeks ago, and we got ignored. And now that the predictable is happening, we've been abandoned with no support, and we've been left to face the music of a crisis that we didn't ask for and that we didn't create. So this is why we're here today, because we're students. We're not a profit-making opportunity. Today we're calling on the University of Manchester and all other universities to cancel their rent and to let people go home from their halls if they want to. We're calling on the Tories to fund universities to allow them to scrap tuition fees and make education truly accessible forever, and to finally listen to UCU to stop more preventable tragedies such as this. Right now, today, demos like this are happening all over the UK, in Kingston, in Glasgow, in Sheffield, in Brighton, in Liverpool, in Bournemouth, and we're here in solidarity with them. We're standing in the spot where we saw strikes in March, and we're back again today. We're here in solidarity with the thousands of students isolated and alone in halls miles away from home. We're here in solidarity with all the members of the university community. We're here with the cleaners who have been left to face the impossible task of making buildings like this COVID safe. We're here with the lecturers who are given weeks to turn education that they've used for years to make them online, even if they don't even know how to turn their cameras off on a Zoom call. We're here in solidarity because that is the only way that we can make our voices heard. So we're here in solidarity with UCU, as always, and with all the other trade unions that are going to get us out of this mess.
Students and workers, unite and fight! Students and workers, unite and fight! Students and workers, unite and fight!
No borders, no nations, fuck deportations! No borders, no nations, fuck deportations!
That and talking about how we need to unite with workers and with unions is such a perfect way to lead into the rent strike. Workers have been striking for years, for decades, to win their rights, and as students we now have the opportunity to follow in that tradition and withhold our rent and affect the university where they'll be impacted the most, and that's in their finances. You're completely right to say that this is a profit-making institution. They lied to us. They brought us here on the pretense that we would have half face-to-face teaching, and then on the third day of the first week, they cancelled that completely. With rent strike, we demand three main things. First of all, we demand a reduction in accommodation fees for this year for at least 40%. If enough people rent strike, we can do that because they would rather make us pay 40% than us not pay at all. We also demand that the university allow people to break their contract and go home so that they're not stuck paying for rooms that they're not even living in, or that they're not stuck in unsafe halls wishing they could leave but being unable to do so. And finally, we demand an increase in the standard of accommodation. There have been rodent infestations, there have been faulty appliances, there have been floods, there have been people having to change accommodation because of break-ins and robberies, and the lack of security is terrifying. The lack of support is terrifying. The fact that when we're isolating, we're being told to go to the shops and wear a mask. That was the email that my flat received when we were one of the first to say that we were isolating. They said, if you can't get a delivery or if you can't get a friend to pick up your stuff, wear a mask and go to the shops. Wear a mask and pick up your laundry. Wear a mask and pick up your coat. That is not only unsafe, it's illegal. And the fact that the university is kind of brushing that over and not giving us the support we need is horrible. So if you want to rent strike, and if you're in a first year in accommodation, follow us on our socials and cancel your rent. It sounds really scary. What you've got to do is just go onto your bank account. If you haven't already set up a direct debit, just don't pay. If you have, just cancel your direct debit. There'll be more information on our socials. But if we do it together, if we have 200 students, or even more, even fucking 1,000 students, we can be incredible, and we'll be able to cost the university hundreds and hundreds of thousands, and they will concede to our demands. Education for the masses, not just for the ruling classes. Education for the masses. No ifs, no buts, no education cuts. No ifs, no buts, no education cuts.
First of all, I was really heartbroken to hear about the coronavirus epidemic breaking out here. But as has been said earlier, not surprised because of the circumstances in which it happened. And it's been mentioned about the scapegoating of students, blaming them for the epidemic. This is unacceptable, just as it was unacceptable earlier. For example, I think in the summer they were trying to blame Muslims for the epidemic and trying to stop them from celebrating the Eid festival. And just about everyone has been blamed for this epidemic except those actually responsible for it. And I'm not just thinking only of the Tory government, but of the capitalist system itself and the profit making. It's been mentioned about the outsourcing of the test and tracing, and this is just unacceptable. If you do not trace the people quick enough, if you wait on average 3 days for a test result, that's after you get symptoms, and most people don't even get symptoms until they had the virus for 5 days, and then you don't even properly trace the people who have come into contact with the infected person. It's hopeless. And it's been shown in some other countries, China, Cuba, South Korea, that it is possible to trace properly and monitor these things. China recently, in one city of Qingdao, tested 9 million people in just 3 days. I think that's more than ever's been tested in Britain, but for comparison, and they trace them properly. Why has this not happened?
So solidarity with you all. Keep up your struggle. I totally agree with you about the rent strike. I would just hope that you get enough people in it so that those taking part in the rent strike don't get penalised. Probably the best way to do that is to make sure enough people take part in the rent strike. And yeah, victory to the students and support your demands. For better education and a safer education.
I'm going to just shout at you. I'm not wearing a mask, so stand back. I coordinate, well that's a strong word for it, I'm a contact person for the local Global Justice Now group. Global Justice Now, if you haven't heard of it, used to be called World Development Movement. And what it is, it's an economic justice lobbying organisation with over 30,000 people across the country. Next Saturday, along with War on Want and a number of other supporting groups, we're having a day of action on international trade, particularly with reference to the trade deal being done in secret in the United States. This threatens to commodify many public services and take further the privatisation of the NHS, and also threatens things like food standards. You'll have heard of chlorinated chicken, perhaps. It's also got implications in terms of the affordability of medicines and the issues to do with big pharma. But that's a different campaign. Anyway, like I said, it's a national day of action, and anyone who's interested in taking part on it, I would encourage you to come along to one of our events and get in contact. If you can't come, or you're isolating, or you're doing something else, you can also take part virtually, and you can find details about it on the Global Justice Now website or on War on Want. We're partner organisations, and it's there. If you're interested in doing anything locally, please come and add your name to a bit of paper, and I'll send you an email with links. Thank you very much indeed for your time.
There's going to be an alternative protest, which is in solidarity with Andy Burnham's demand that anybody who's put out of work because of COVID should be paid the full furlough of 80%, and they should increase the benefits. People may know MP's got a £3,360 pay rise this week, which I did calculate amounts to 44 weeks of job seekers allowance. Well, when somebody's pay rise who's caused the problem is worth 44 times the pay that you're going to give people a week who've been made unemployed, there's something fundamentally wrong. So I think we should stand with Andy Burnham and go to Piccadilly Gardens, the Queen Victoria statue at 12 o'clock and make that point. So if people want to come along and join us, that would be great.
Thanks everyone for coming today. We're going to do a few few more chants for the last flare, but just another kind of final reminder about the rent strike. I know I've been going on about it so much, but as students it really is our most effective way to impact the uni and to have our voices heard. Education is a right, this is why we must fight. Education is a right, this is why we must fight. Education is a right, this is why we must fight. Education is a right, this is why we must fight. Education is a right, this is why we must fight. Education is a right, this is why we must fight. Education is a right, this is why we must fight. Education is a right, this is why we must fight. Education for the masses, not just for the ruling classes. Education for the masses, not just for the ruling classes. Boris Johnson is a wanker. Boris Johnson is a wanker. And he's a racist too. 9K for what? 9K for what? 9K for what? Thank you everyone so much for coming. Social media and stuff, but